Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Despite their best efforts, Roma fell at the hands of reigning champions Juventus, which means that Max Allegri's men remain unbeaten in Serie A. How did Juventus do it? Where did Roma go wrong? Don't worry, here are the interviews. We've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to break down how Juventus beat Roma. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/footy analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In today's video, we're going to break down how both sides look to approach the game, why Roma decide to move to a 3-5-2, then get to the first half and see how Juve were able to take the lead before we get into the second half and see how they were able to close out the game despite Roma adjusting. But first, let's get to the starting lineups. We look at Juve, no real surprises, 4-3-3. Mandzukic, Ronaldo, and Dybala up front. In midfield, they went with Matuidi, Bentancur, and Pjanic. Then we get to Roma, 3-5-2 like we said. Schick and Under up front. Out in the wing-back roles, they went with Florenzi and Santon. And in midfield, Zaniolo, Cristante, and Nzonzi. So now, let's look into the first half, see how both sides look to approach the game, and why Roma decide to play in a 3-5-2. So the main talking point heading into any Juventus match nowadays is how is the opposition going to stop them? Here, Roma moved to more of a 3-5-2. It made sense on paper given the fact that you knew Roma was going to press, and the way that they pressed kind of dictated how they were going to line up based on the fact that if Juventus are playing in more of a 4-3-3, the 3-5-2 kind of makes sense. You have Under and you have Schick who could press out to the center backs to ensure that they're unable to push forward, and you want that to happen because Chiellini and Bonucci are reliable passers from deep. You have the wider players in Santon and Florenzi who could step forward and close down in those wider areas. And then you have the midfield battle up front. So that means that even if you do play it long and direct, you're going to have to rely on Ronaldo, on Mandzukic, and Dybala to make something out of those aerial duels and create something from that aspect because they have everything covered here. Yes, you don't want to go 3v3, but this Juventus front line doesn't really boast the pace or the ability to really run at you and harm you if they do get the ball in those areas. So they could afford to do that and rely on the central midfield and the wing backs to recover their positions in time. As you can see, what you have here is even with Pjanic dropping off a bit deeper, you want Nzonzi there because Nzonzi is supposed to press him and vice versa. We saw Pjanic trying to get to Nzonzi in the earlier stages of that first half. What Roma could do here was that they could have Zaniolo push forward, and they can have Nzonzi cover him. They have Cristante push forward and have Nzonzi push out into those positions. That was one element that they could go about it. The same thing applied there was that even if they did do that and Matuidi would push out into wider areas, they could have cover. They could push out one of the wing backs or one of the center backs and have Nzonzi step a bit deeper. But that was how they were kind of going about things. They were able to really prevent Juventus from building out of the back from goal kicks. They were pressing and closing them down to ensure that they were unable to really dictate the tempo of the game from deeper positions, and this was key, and it did lead to some opportunities. We saw Bentancur try to get away from Zaniolo because basically it was Zaniolo against Bentancur, Cristante against Matuidi. Yes, they did interchange positions, but that's how it was at the base shape. We saw Bentancur kind of drop off after the press was applied on the center backs, and instantly Zaniolo stepped to him. He was able to dispossess him and play the ball back to Nzonzi, who skied his effort over the net. Another opportunity later on in the half where Schick just stepping closer to Chiellini. Chiellini ended up clearing the ball off him. He was able to pick up the ball in the right half space, pull it back to Santon, and Santon's cross into Nzonzi was knotted tamely at the keeper. But you could see that their pressing was causing Juventus a few issues. It did lead to a few half chances that if Roma had better quality players, perhaps it could have forced Szczesny into more of a save. But that was how they were going about it. The other aspect was in that 3-5-2, if they could get the wing backs a bit higher, it does put a lot of pressure on the central midfielders, specifically the shuttlers. Because if you could push them out into those wider areas, now you have a three-man midfield, and if the wider players are stuck in those positions, or if you have the wider or the forwards pushing out into those wide zones, then you need someone to pick up the Santons. You need someone to pick up the Florenzis. We saw one of their better chances where it's Matuidi who should be stepping out to get to Santon. He doesn't step out quick enough. The ball is played into is played into Schick, who's able to roll Bonucci, who steps up a bit higher, and he's able to fire a shot on goal. But again, that should have been a better opportunity, but just goes to show that if you play this system, you get the wing backs forward, then that means that they are attacking with multiple players. They could create overloads in those wider areas, and that was how they were really going about their business. They were pressing from the front. They had enough numbers that even if they did drop off a bit deeper and they played in a 5, they had the back 5, then they still defended an 8, and they were still able to really close down markers. Again, no real overload in midfield. We did see on occasion where Bentancur dropped off and tried to split the defense and split the center backs, and what you ended up seeing there was Dybala dropping off, and with Dybala dropping off, we saw Kolarov step to him, but at some stages that did not happen, and that helped Juventus push forward. But for the grand scheme of things, the way that they lined up made sense because they pressed from the front, they closed down those spaces, there was no numerical advantage in midfield, and it was about how now Juventus were gonna get past Roma. So now when we look in and we see how Roma looked to approach the game, let's look to Juve, because they did go into halftime up 1-0. So let's see how they were able to create chances and how Mandzukic was able to score the opener to put Juve up at halftime. So similar to Roma, Juve also pressed from the front, and it did lead to some issues, and it ensured that Roma couldn't play out of the back. Their press was much simpler based on the fact that it was 3v3, so they did have the front 3 stepping forward. We saw on one occasion where Olsen tried to play the ball out to Santon, and we saw Alexandro step, and then he was forced to play it back before the ball was cleared. Another opportunity that did stem, we saw the ball played out to Fazio, and Fazio did not see Bentancur stepping to him. Bentancur stepped to him, and he tried to play the ball into Nzonzi, but Pjanic stepped to Nzonzi, who ended up playing it to Dybala, which led to Ronaldo getting the ball, but his pullback was intercepted by Nzonzi. But that's kind of how they were going about it. They were able to press the same way. They had the numerical advantage in midfield. They were able to push the front 3 out, and they're able to push the fullbacks into those areas, so it wasn't a big issue for them, and both sides kind of canceled each other out in that regard. Similar to Roma as well, Juventus' best chances stem from the wider areas. Alexandro did force Olsen into a save from a deflected shot in the earlier stages within the opening 10 minutes, but we saw him constantly get forward. The first time we saw him get forward, he was able to turn Cristante, who was tasked with dealing with him, turned him, was able to drive forward into the box, not close down until Manolas stepped, and he was able to force, again, Olsen into another save. Another opportunity, we see the ball shifted out to him, and again, no Cristante shifting out, no Santon shifting out, because again, they have to deal with the front 3 and their movement. The ball is delivered, cross is delivered into the box, Ronaldo tries to attack it, they end up winning a corner kick. But besides that, Alexandro played a key role, and the other factor was De Sciglio played a key role as well. When we first saw De Sciglio, in terms of a defensive perspective, De Sciglio was solid throughout, but going forward, he did play a key part into how Juventus were able to get the opener. But he did have another opportunity prior to that where Florenzi didn't step out to him quickly. Zaniolo was there, and what we saw was that Bentancur was able to run in behind him, and we saw this a lot from Roma where the shuttlers were switching off. You have the 2 shuttlers out there in the central roles. They're dealing with Matuidi, they're dealing with Bentancur, but we saw Matuidi constantly drift out into the left channel. We saw him push forward and try to make runs in behind the defense. The same thing happened here. De Sciglio not closed down. Bentancur makes a simple run, and what happens now is that he's able to play the pass into Bentancur De Sciglio, who's able to turn, run at goal, and he slides it to Ronaldo, who's able to cut in on Santon and force Olsen into another save. That's a big warning sign. The way that they score the winner, we see Bonucci clip the ball over the top. We see De Sciglio try to run onto it. Florenzi's able to track it, and he's able to win the ball back. But what happens here is that he clears the ball into Zaniolo. So Zaniolo is able to get onto it, but Bentancur steps to him quickly, the Juventus press. What happens now is that he clears the ball off Bentancur, and it falls to De Sciglio, who's able to clip the ball to the far post. And who is it? Mario Mandzukic, big game player, always seems to be at the far post, towering over fullbacks or even center backs, and he does it again, and he beats Olsen from point blank range. Nothing he could do about it, and that was how Juventus were able to go ahead. You did have Ronaldo dropping off on a few occasions, driving at goal, but that was how they were finding their chances. Sandro wasn't being closed down by Cristante, and he was able to deliver crosses and push forward. De Sciglio also played a key factor in the sense that he was playing forward passes, he was defensively solid, and again, again, his cross led to Mandzukic's goal. So now let's look to the second half, see how Roma were attempting to try and change the game, and how Juve were able to hold out and claim 3 points. The second half saw Roma move to a 4-2-3-1. They brought on Kluivert in replacement for Florenzi. Kluivert moved out to the left and he was looking to be a direct threat. And what happened now is that you had Under, who often took up a narrow position in that right side, trying to get closer to Schick, with Zaniolo just ahead of Cristante and ahead of Nzonzi. However, Roma still encountered the same issues. And it was the fact that, again, Juventus were just getting balls out in wider areas and they weren't closing them down. Like I said, with Under just a bit narrow, it freed up space for Alexandro to break forward, and one of their chances did see Alexandro push forward, and he wasn't closed down quick enough by Santon. And what happened there is that you had Mandzukic and you had Matuidi already breaking in, and they were occupying to the 2 center backs, and Ronaldo was able to charge forward, and with Ronaldo charging forward towards the box, the cross was delivered between the 2 center backs, but he can only nod his effort over the net. It was a great chance for Ronaldo. He was able to break free, and they had the markers occupied, but again, it just goes to show fullbacks getting forward from Juventus' side, no one closing them down. That's a big problem. That's a big problem based on the fact that, again, when you really look at it, it's really simple. If Under's not tracking him, you got to get the wider players to step out in the fullbacks, or you got to get someone in that pivot to shift over. That was a big problem as well. And then we look at the other opportunity. It stems from Bonucci, who's able to deliver a ball out from deep. He was getting closed down by Zaniolo, but he wasn't there tight enough. And what happens there is that, again, a similar issue that occurred in the first half. It's Bentancur pushing beyond Cristante. Cristante not tracking the run, which drags Fazio out of position. And Nzonzi tucks in, but what happens there is that he pulls it back to Dybala. Dybala's not closed by Kolarov from a deeper position. Ronaldo's able to get in behind. He spins in behind Nzonzi and in behind Manolas, and he nods his effort on goal that Olsen pushes away and it's cleared for a corner kick, and then that ensuing corner kick, Bonucci flicks on the near post corner into the path of Ronaldo from point blank range, and he should score. But when you break it down and you look at it, you have Juventus who do drop off into more of 2 banks of 4 in the second half, because they know the onus is on Roma to come at them, and they have the counter-attacking threat to really pose. And Roma just doesn't have any options. No guile. The direct threats weren't winning their 1v1 battles. Under was pretty much anonymous. Kluivert tried his best to really offer something, but Schick, Zaniolo, lacking any service, no real creativity in those deeper zones. And for Juventus, it was simple. Stayed very narrow. They had Mandzukic dropping off to ensure that there was no overlapping runs with Kolarov pushing forward. They kept the midfield bank tight. Matuidi was out on the left. If the ball was shifted over, it's the same thing. Just keep narrow and ensure that they have enough numbers on that side of the pitch. Roma didn't have any threat there. And when you think about it, they made the changes. They brought on Perotti. Perotti moved out to the right-hand side, or Perotti moved to the left. Kluivert moved to the right. Didn't really change much. Dzeko eventually came on. That pushed out, and that pushed Zaniolo back into midfield. And when you think about that, now they're more of a 4-4-2 to an extent, but that didn't really change much. Whereas Juventus brought on Emre Can to solidify things in midfield. They eventually took off Dybala for Douglas Costa, which then saw them move to a 4-5-1 now, with Mandzukic out on one side, and they had Costa on the other. And like I said, just Douglas Costa's ability to break on the counterattack. Juventus were comfortable, and they only had one real threat that stemmed from a free kick that eventually the header was knotted into the path to Szczesny. But besides that, Juve were comfortable. They found threats in wide areas. They had forced Olsen to various saves through Ronaldo. They probably should have increased their lead, but they were comfortable without the ball in the second half and worthy winners and remain unbeaten in Serie A. But let me know what you guys think. I ask this all the time. Is anyone going to beat Juventus in this league? If so, how are they going to do it? And what about Roma? Very inconsistent this season. Dzeko's back now, but can they finish in the top 4? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.